it's not really that accurate. I'll just copy that, and I'll go in here and call this dust generator, and we'll call this dust release. So there we are. So basically our dust is generated here and our dust is released here. So now if I play through the simulation, I'll turn off the display of this. I'll change it to dots, so it's a little less obvious in the viewport, and I'll change this to let's say ticks, so it's a little bit more obvious. So now you can see we've got our red particles, and they come down, and then they move along. So let's actually look at that from another angle. Now, one thing to bear in mind with this particular flow is that we've got a cache up here, and that's actually can cause issues with updating our flow. So I'll just rewind to the beginning here. I'll get the cache and I'll just clear the cache, and that's to ensure that what we've been caching previously isn't kept. What can happen is that the cache isn't actually updated when we turn on certain operators like collision and so forth. So I'll just clear out the cache. We've got it all set up, and I'll just press play, and this will actually just cache the simulation with a clean start. So there you go. You can see our particles are being birthed, and you can see as the foot leaves the ground, you can see it's actually colliding and creating these particles. And you can see it's pretty heavy, you know. Let me just rewind that a bit. We'll just go down here and change the display to dots, because I think it's maybe a little bit overwhelming with it turned on to ticks. We'll just let that play. And if we go and have a look at the event, we'll see what goes on in it. The first thing is we've got this spawn operator here, spawn test. And that's just basically taking every particle of dust that we've got generated here and multiplying it by a certain number of times. And you can see we're using a value of 10 here. So for every original for every original dust particle, we then create 10 dust particles. Then we give them a speed along the icon arrow, and that's using obviously the icon arrow here to generate speed. So that basically blows the particles upwards. Then we've got gravity pulling the particles back down towards the ground plane. We've got a side wind, which is this force here. You can see we've got this wind over here blowing the particles sideways. And then we've got this other force here, which is foot wind, and these are actually the forces which are actually on each foot. And that, as I said, gives a sort of suction and pulls the particles off the ground when they're generated. So there you are, it's reached the end of the simulation. If we just scrub backwards, I'll just finish off running through this event before we actually have a look what it does again. We've got drag, which slows down our dust so it doesn't blow away too quickly. Then we got collision detection with the feet, and that's just so that when the feet actually hit the dust, they push it out of the way, which is more sort of realistic than the feet obviously just passing through the dust, which isn't particularly realistic. Then we've got a cull, and that's basically for any dust which strikes the ground. We won't have it bouncing off the ground, we'll just have it being killed off immediately. And you can see it's just sent over here to this delete operator, just to make sure that that dust is removed from the scene. We've got the dust set up to be a tetrahedron. We've got it rotated randomly so we don't get any sort of obvious alignment. And then we delete the dust after 50 frames plus 25 minus 25. So we've got a random range on the life of the dust between 25 and 75 frames in length. So basically what we're doing is we're setting up these seed particles here. That's when it collides with the ground. So if you can imagine, when the foot comes down and strikes the ground, it goes through the collision object, which you can see is pretty much planar. At that point, it generates lots of sort of seed dust. And that seed dust is then left there on the ground. It doesn't do anything, doesn't move, whatever. And then what we do is when we strike the collision deflector releaser, this is on the when the foot is back on its way up, that's when it releases it on into this area. At this point, we multiply the dust, we create a lot more of it, and then we allow it to blow away in the wind. So if I actually scrub along here a little bit, you'll see the foot comes down, generates the dust. You'll see it pretty much sits there. And then when the foot sucks off the ground, you can see at that point, that's when the dust is actually multiplied. And you can see it does actually get pulled off the ground by the foot. Now, I've used quite a sharp fall off. If I show you the range here, it's actually updating the particle flow at this point. So because I've actually modified the space swap somewhat.